Good evening and welcome to Reboot Represents. Today is February 8th, 2021. I'm your host, Harry Turpin. With me as always is producer Kevin Tanner. Before we start our programming, we'd like to take this time to state Black Lives Matter. We'd also like to take a moment to acknowledge that wherever you're joining us from, you are on Indigenous land. Reboot Represents is broadcasting from the historic and contemporary lands of the Duwamish, Suquamish, and all Coast Salish people. We acknowledge the forced displacement of Native communities from this land, while honoring the endurance of the Duwamish people who still live here. To this day, the Duwamish people have yet to receive federal recognition. We encourage you to visit the Duwamish Longhouse and Cultural Center in West Seattle to learn more. Our panel tonight includes artists from the various disciplines of theater, gathered to hear their thoughts and opinions on the topic of theater and how it relates to Black artists. Our program encourages all of our guests to speak frankly and to speak their truth, and it is our hope that our guests will engage in a frank and honest dialogue. As such, at times it may be a challenging conversation as we will be asked to examine our own thoughts, choices, and biases. Reboot is excited and honored to continue our learning, and we are deeply grateful to our guests for having this conversation with us. As always, there will be a question and answer period for our guests, so please feel free to submit through whatever forum you're watching. Don't forget to like us on Facebook, YouTube, and other social media platforms, and be sure to spread the word about tonight's programming. As we dive into our conversation tonight, I'd like to kick things off by sharing a few key events from a very, very incomplete timeline of Black theater history in Seattle. First, the Playhouse Theater, now officially renamed the Floyd and Dolores Jones Playhouse, received funding as part of the Federal Theater Project created under the New Deal in 1933 and became the home to the Negro Repertory Company. Considered one of the best programs in the nation, it is estimated that as many as 200 Black artists, or approximately 5% of Seattle's Black population in 1940, were involved in at least one of the productions over several years. Next, Black Arts West was Seattle's first Black theater and eventually became artistically recognized across the United States. The theater evolved out of the civil rights Black Power movement of the 60s, with a focus on theater and dance, as well as an art gallery displaying the work of local and national artists. There is a street named after the artistic director, Douglas Q. Barnett. It is part of Union Street, located in the U District. Mr. Barnett also went on to write the book, The Historical Dictionary of African American Theater. Another key moment is the Hansberry Project, which was founded in 2004 and was created as an African American theater lab for African American artists. As they describe it, the Hansberry Project is rooted in the convictions that Black artists should be at the center of the artistic process, that the community deserves excellence in its art, and that theater's fundamental function is to put people in relationship to one another. Their goal is to create a space where the entire community can be enriched by the voices of professional Black artists, reflecting autonomous concerns, investigations, dreams, and artistic expression. To find out more, you can visit thehansberryproject.org. The Earth Pearl Collective was founded in 2011 by Sadiqua Iman. Their mission is to support the work of women living at the intersection of the African diaspora, who are dedicated to healing their communities through creative collaborations. Today, this support continues in the form of productions, fiscal sponsorship, artist development, and institutional advocacy. Brown Soul Productions, formed in 2016, announced in June of 2020 that they would be the new tenants and manager of the Slate Space, located in the International District. Their goal is to turn it into an interdisciplinary theater space. Brown Soul Productions' mission is to nurture and produce new work by women of color. To find out more, please visit brownsoulproductions.org. And with that, I'm excited to be joined by my guests for the evening. First, we're joined by Alma Davenport. Alma is an award-winning playwright, poet, storyteller, and producer with roots in Washington, D.C. and New York. She is the artistic producing director of the Slate Theater, an interdisciplinary art space located in Seattle, Washington, and Brown Soul Productions, an organization committed to nurturing and amplifying the voices of women of color through the development and production of creative new work. Next, we're joined by Siddiqua Amman. Siddiqua builds bridges across many different artistic and institutional disparities. She uses dance, theater, and poetry to deconstruct complex issues and boil them down to the bare bones of healing as a community in order to move forward as a nation. Siddiqua is most well known for her work as Naomi, a genderqueer burlesque performer and drag king that weaves politics, sexual liberation, and comedy together to seduce audiences to constantly evolve. Siddiqua is also the artistic director of Earth Pearl Collective. And rounding out our panel tonight is DeSean Halley, who considers himself as a jock who found theater by accident. He is a graduate of the University of Washington and a former member of the marching band. He loves long walks on the beach with his sousaphone and will be a first-time dad in May. He has appeared at Seattle Musical Theater, Sound Theater, the Gilbert and Sullivan Society, as well as appearing as Mr. Mushnick in our production of Little Shop of Horrors. Welcome to everybody, and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Hello. Thank you so much for giving up your evening and for being here on this lovely Monday evening. Since we're going to kick things off because we got a tight hour here and we want to get some time for some questions and things. Since we are here in in Black History Month, I'd love to start off and hear some thoughts from all of you in terms of any Black companies that you would like to uplift and or amplify, whether that's locally, nationally, or from around the world. And anybody can jump in at any time.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, anybody who wants to work with us.
Absolutely. And we can flash that up there on the screen, Kevin, if you want to throw that up there. brownsoulproductions.org. Check them out. They are local here and doing some great work. Alma, tell us a little bit just about the work that you do.
Okay, so what we do primarily is right now we're operating like in the theater space. So we've been developing last year we developed about 4 new plays that came out of a playwriting intensive that I taught. Eventually, and in the future, what we want to move towards is going into more interdisciplinary art forms. So, like, even though we're mostly doing new theater works now, like I was saying earlier, hopefully, what we can do one day is, like, if a choreographer wants to come in and develop like a new ballet, we would be able to provide the resources for that choreographer to do that. Or like if a poet comes in and has like a new work or some performance art that they want to do, we would be able to, help them, see their vision all the way to fruition. So, yeah, did that answer your question?
It does. It does. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So certainly we want to amplify again. Kevin, if you want to throw that little graphic up there, that's brownsoulproductions.org. You can check them out and see their website and see what they are up to. That's very, very exciting. Anybody else have a company that you would like to amplify or talk about at this time?
Sure. Of course, Earth Pro Collective, our organization. We actually last year launched the Healing Arts Center, Niles Edge Healing Arts. And basically we are working on just trying to create more spaces to do work, especially now that the pandemic is going on. And just trying to find more places for Black people specifically to be able to say this is for Black people and be unapologetic about it, because it's so rare that we can do that. So that's what Earth Pro is working on these days, and other organizations in the city doing it, like Nurturing Roots, who's doing it through farming and food justice and things like that. So yeah, we're out here trying to combine the two.
So Siddiqua, you bring up something that's really interesting. And Alma, we talked a little bit before, just in terms of space and how that's disappearing from Seattle in general. Mm-hmm. Are you finding that pre-pandemic, what was the experience before the pandemic happened? And now, particularly with the pandemic and everything shut down, are you finding that it is even more difficult to find those types of spaces, or has there been a reset in the playing field? How are you finding that experience now versus then?
I think it's been a reset.
Yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
You go ahead, Sadiqua. I'll come in after you.
I was going to say, definitely it's been a reset. I remember, right before the pandemic, even just speaking of, Brown Soul Productions over at the Slate Theater, we were like, finally, because this is going to be one of the only places, that is actually, Black owned, that we can go and support while trying to do our work. And it was like one. And now, of course, now that the pandemic and everyone has fired everybody or done all this stuff, all the theaters are like, hey, come here now. And it's like, now you want us to come over here.
Interesting. Alma, did you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I found that, okay, so before we moved into the Slate, or before we acquired the Slate, just as a small, new-ish theater company, it was really difficult to find space to do anything. And it was a real struggle. I remember last February, I was, searching like high and low for somewhere to actually be able to produce out of, because we had a couple of shows that we wanted to do, and I wasn't really having very much luck finding anywhere. And the stars aligned, and we were able to get the Slate, or have that opportunity to move into the Slate. And I don't know. And then the pandemic happened, and since the pandemic happened, I don't know, because I've been basically trying to keep a empty space open that we really can't use or do anything with right now. And so I can't really speak to what the landscape is in general for everyone else, because now I'm in a position of being a venue manager, right? So yeah, but yeah, I don't know.
Well, and that's really curious as we move forward too, as to what that's going to mean to create that safe space. But when do we get to reopen with all the phases and things? And I know that this wasn't necessarily part of our talk track for tonight, but you said something that was really interesting, and I wanted to just kind of dive on that. And we'll talk a little bit more, Alma, if we have the time at the end. I'd love to bring back and circle around just about how people can get in, and particularly as we move into phase 2, what that might look like for some folks, and help promote the slate as well as your company again at the end, because I think that's really important for companies to know where they should be able to go. So we'll definitely bring that back. And hopefully, Kevin, if you are listening out there, you can remind me to do that at the end if I forget. We're going to dive in, friends, and we're just going to talk about some things here. So as I prepared our panel with our questions tonight, so and I really want to invite all of you to speak openly and honestly and frankly through as we move through the questions tonight. We're going to start out with the big one right out of the gate, which is, as a city, Seattle is very white. It is 66% of the population is white, and it is one of the whitest cities in the country. As Black artists, how do you feel, as artists who are Black, how do you feel the theaters who here have done in showcasing and featuring performers, directors, choreographers, and writers who are Black?
I guess I'll jump in. I feel that I know me as an actor, I feel that when I audition for things, that I definitely do get cast not so much based on my skin color, but based on talent by itself, and that does make me feel good. But then again, I know that I'm not the only one who goes through something completely different, right? Because I try to create a rapport with directors and with casting people so that they get to know me as a person. I mean, obviously, color will always be will always be something that people will notice because I can't walk through the world and just be a mute color. I will always be Black. I'm born Black. I'm gonna die Black, right? So I think it also just depends on the individual person.
Sure.
That's just my experience. But then again, being one who's been born and raised in Seattle, I only know what things that go on in Seattle, how we do things here. I don't know what happens in other parts of the country.
So your experience, DeSean, has been a relatively positive one. You feel that it has been representative in the work that has been done. Mm-hmm. Is that the theater here have done a pretty decent job, a good job of. Would you say good? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yeah, I would say they've done a pretty decent job.
Okay.
I haven't heard anything super outlandish, but then again, I try to keep a suitable distance so that way I can at least both observe what's going on, therefore be able to make an opinion afterwards.
Okay, all right. Alma, Sadiqua, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, from what I see, I think that they definitely make an effort. And as far as as far as the work that's being done, I do see theaters doing work by Black writers or writers of color, writers from diverse perspectives, and then casting, trying to cast for that. But one thing that I do notice, that I can't help but notice, is even the shows that are specifically, that have Black casts or that are written by Black people, are really geared for white audiences. So I mean, that's just the thing, right? But yeah. So I mean, like, do plays written by Black people, are they produced out here? Yeah, they are. Do Black actors get to work out here? Yeah, from what I see, they do. But who is the audience? Like, who is it for? And I think that that's something that we should definitely start to think about, the audiences that we want to engage in, and the community that we actually want to build is important.
So as I'm hearing you, would you say then that the theaters are picking the shows that, for lack of a better term, have commercial appeal? They're the ones, hey, these are the ones that everybody knows and love, and therefore we're going to do this tried and true production in that way because we know it's going to fit our audience base, as opposed to taking risks on maybe a lesser known work or something that might be more reflective of an experience that does not cater to that base?
I don't know that I would use the word commercial appeal. I think I would use the word white appeal.
Okay.
because that's different. Because Tyler Perry's commercial too, right?
Right.
But everybody doesn't like him because that's not necessarily that audience. You know what I mean?
Right.
So yeah.
Okay. Sadiqua, any thoughts on this particular subject?
Yeah, I would actually just piggybacking off of what you said, Harry, as far as is it commercial? And I do agree with you. It's not quite commercial, but it is, for lack of a better word, lazy.
Can you explain a little bit more about
whatever, that? Yeah. Absolutely. Like whoever made it's like the top 40 is the type of Black theater that Seattle does. It's like, what are all the theaters doing right now? What's fresh off of Broadway right now? What does everybody else say we should do right now? And I don't think it always necessarily reflects Seattle, because Seattle is completely different than, any other place
right,
in
right.
the country in many, many unique ways. But they do make sure that they check the boxes to do the work. Most of the theaters here could check all the boxes. Yes, we've done this. Yes, we've done this. So I would say the attempt is definitely there. It's just that second layer of, are you invested in what is actually going on in the community to say this is the Black production or the Latino production or the Native American production that should be done this year because of this thing going on in that community, as opposed to what do we as a white audience feel guilty about this quarter? Let's make sure we put that on stage, like you said, for our viewership, not necessarily to move a conversation forward or even to change a conversation.
Well, and you kind of have answered my next question, which I'll bring up at this particular point just to see if there are any other thoughts, but whether or not you believe the type of shows being done in Seattle are reflective of the Black experience. And obviously there's not one Black experience. Everyone's experience is going to be different, right? But do all of you believe that it sounds as though the boxes are checked to be able to say, yes, we did our thing. We earn our woke points at this particular point, but but it's not really expanding or broadening minds in that way. Would you agree with that, or expand on that?
I would totally agree with that, because I mean, there's so much Black theater and Black productions out there that I don't even know about, right? And I would like to expand that part of my mind as well, just because it would make me feel good. But I also know there's inherent risk in that, and it's ironic kind of, because theater is about taking risks at the very heart of the craft, right? But sometimes theater companies will only do just a little bit, just to dip the toe in, versus trying to just jump in the water head first, and then let's see what happens.
Yeah. Alma, Siddiqua, any thoughts from either of you on that?
Can you ask the question one more time? By the way, you have a high five button on here, Harry, because everything Siddiqua just said, I was like, yes.
You can just put your hand up like that. We'll know it's a high five. We'll do a collective high five to the camera, just like that. For everything, we'll just, whenever you want to do it, if you guys are feeling it, just throw your hand up against that camera, and we will know that we are on track. But for sure, the question was whether Sadiqua had mentioned that they're checking the boxes, and but it's a laziness. It's really what is happening, and how that, and it really ties into what you were saying earlier too, Alma, in terms of the experience and what is happening vetted for white audiences. So the question really is, do you believe that shows are reflective of the overall experience? And it sounds as though, just based off of the answers that I'm hearing, that is not the case, that there is a lot of work that needs to be done in order to really get at that experience, and understanding that every single experience is different.
Yeah, see, that's the thing, right? There are so many different types of Black people out here having so many different types of experiences, and everybody wants to talk about like the Black experience, like there's one like Black experience that all Black people have, and it's just like, no, like there's so many facets, and yes, there are some things that underscore the Black experience, but like you got the white experience, right? And the there's so many different facets to that, and then on a whole nother level, you have the human experience, right? So like when people start talking about like the Black experience, it's kind of like, we could talk about someone's story, who happens to be Black, and like all the stuff that they're going through, and just, being in their personhood and trying to live their life and their journey, but yeah, so like, do the shows speak to the Black experience? I guess every show that has a cast full of Black people in it are speaking to some version of it. But the experience as a whole, I don't even know what that is or what that means.
Totally fair. And I apologize if my question is tone deaf in any sort of way.
That's okay. That's a fair question, because people always want to talk about the Black experience.
Well,
so, yeah.
Right. And I think really, as I'm sitting here listening, and obviously there are many experiences of what it is to be Black and things like that. So what I'm taking away from what all of you have said is that yes, we're doing work. Yes, the theaters they're checking off those boxes, but they're the same tired boxes that we've been checking off for years, and that we're not really taking a risk to be able to present new and exciting and different points of view. It's the same thing that is safe and doesn't really rock the boat and doesn't provide any risk, as you had mentioned, DeSean.
Yeah, how many times can you do hairspray? Right.
Right. Exactly.
It's a great show. Don't get me wrong, but how many times do we need to have that show out there? Go, see, we have stuff where we're using not just Black people but people of color, right? And it's like, okay, that's great, but there's so much more out there. It's like some is good. Everything that's been going on in theater for not just Black folks but people of color as well has been okay. But what else can you do going forward? I think is the ultimate question that theaters need to ask and answer for themselves.
Right. Like if you think about just the culture of the Pacific Northwest as far as reflective, you don't get a strong slave plantation history here when it comes to Black people. Yet when they show Black theater, we go straight to the slave porn, and it's like, that's not even the experience up here. What you're showing, right. It is the history of the country, but what about what was the, let's do a show about redlining. Let's do a show about what Seattle did to Black people, as opposed to this outside what America has done to Black people, because then it gets more personal, then it gets more itchy and uncomfortable, and do my donors want to see this reflection put in front of them?
Absolutely. And going back to what you said, if I may just join in a little bit, but as a theater, it is so easy to produce a piece that does not reflect it, because as an audience, we can say, hey, look, this happened somewhere else. This doesn't pertain to you. This has nothing to do with you. And we're in this particular space. And isn't that horrible? All those horrible things that have happened. And now you can go get your Starbucks and not feel guilty about it. Right. I mean, that's really kind of what it comes down to, which leads me into my next question for all of you, which is, what do you think Seattle's biggest blind spots are in terms of racial and their failings in terms of racial equality?
Seattle's biggest problem is these white people out here feeling like they're not racist.
Can I give a high five? Yeah, can I give a high five there? Yeah.
All right, let's jump into it.
Let's do it.
I mean, that's really all I'm going to say about that. That's really all I have to say, but somebody else can go.
Okay.
And what you're saying is it does have a lot of layers, right? Because a lot of it is it's low key, systemic racism. It's not so much in your face like it would be, say, in the South, right? And my grandfather was born not in Arkansas. So he was born in Missouri. So what he was dealing with when he was growing up is completely different to what I've done. I mean, I've lived here in Seattle my whole life, and I didn't really notice the subtlety growing up. It wasn't until I became an adult I was like, oh, that I should not have liked the way, you know, a phrase had been said, because they were low key undermining me as a human being. And, you know, again, when you're 13, 14, 15, like you don't like you feel it because you feel the vibe change within a person, but you can never pinpoint what it is. And I think that's not so much indicative to just Seattle or the state of Washington, but kind of the whole West Coast in general. Like our Black story is completely different to everywhere else in the country, right? Because if you look at it historically, Black folks, you know, immigrated west to get away from all that, and then as a coping mechanism, just kind of blocked it out and said, we're going to raise the future to not necessarily, you know, not so much like not know about it, but more, you know, live that life that they wanted, that our parents wanted. At least that's my feeling. I might have gotten off subject a little bit. Sorry.
That's okay. That's all right. Sadiqua, do you have any thoughts on that? Or
yeah, I definitely think that. I think that no, I don't think they're doing enough. And I think one of the blind spots is the fact that they think that they can do it, period.
Can you explain a little bit more about that? Yeah.
That an institution that is historically white thinks that they can magically speak to all of these other experiences, produce something that is going to speak to it because they have the budget and because they can hire a one-off here or there, as opposed to, hey, we really want to do more of this work. Let's collaborate with the people who are doing the work. Like, I don't think a lot of the larger theaters are as invested in the communities that they say they want to be more in partnership or in community with, right? It's always come to us, and we will have something for you to see, as opposed to what would it look like if you, instead of producing in your space, you produce in the neighborhood, or you collaborate with an organization, or you don't even have anything to do with it. You just give that organization your budget that you have for your color show, you know, and I say color, not meaning, you know, Black color, but because they say people of color and Black people really get their own slot. You know, let's be real. It's a rainbow thing. As long as we do something brown, we've checked the box. So right. That's why I'm saying colored, just so that that's clear of the language that I'm using. So, you know, but there are Asian run founded, you know, theater companies, Black, Indigenous people, you know, like there are all these companies that are rooted in the community that have everything you need to produce a production that is relevant, that is on point, that is brilliant, that is creative, that is out of the box, that is not basic. The only thing they don't have is the budget. And then you have all these theaters that have a budget to do this thing. Matter of fact, they got a grant to do the thing. And they say, okay, now let us try to figure it out. And they sit there and figure it out and experiment with it and do it wrong a few 20, 30 times, 20, 30 years sometimes, you know, like, but never think, actually, let's just move these resources over to the people who are already doing it so we can see what it looks like to do it right.
You bring up an interesting topic and kind of segues into a question that I had for later on, but I'm going to approach it now, and then we might circle back to a couple of the other questions I have. But with February being Black History Month, in the theater community, it is not uncommon for those theaters to say, hey, it's time to do our Black show. It's time, you know, The Wiz is happening, or whatever we're doing in February. It's going on. So what goes through your mind when you're starting to work for a company who is doing their Black show in February and things like that? Are there any signs that you are looking for to know that you're going to be appreciated or taken care of as an artist in that particular situation? And conversely, what are potential red flags that you might look for when working for an organization that is just producing work that might be happening only in the month of February and not really carrying that mission of diversity and inclusion throughout the rest of the year? I know it's a big question.
I think for starters, making sure you have once you pick your show, whatever show it is, that you pick a Black director, because again, each show is unique. Like, we'll take a show like, I don't know, Passing Strange musical, and you know, there's certain things that, you know, Black people go through that a white director can't necessarily, you know, navigate through correctly without sitting down with their cast and asking these questions, which again is also okay. It's just that particular director has to be open-minded enough to say, hey, the script says is walking me through this situation. I don't know how that works, because that's not my life. Explain it to me. I think that's starting there, just starting at the groundwork and having a Black director at first is just an all-around good idea. If you can't find one, look harder.
Sure. And so
I was about to say, there is no, you can't find one. There's always one.
Right. Yeah. That's why it's like, you just got to look for them. They're there. You just got to be willing to, you know, bring one in and talk to them and see what it is that they want to do as well.
So would you, just to go back just a little bit here in this particular question, do you think that it's more harmful than good that theaters are just checking off these boxes 1 month? And I think we all know what the answer is going to be. I'm posing the question out there so that way we can riff on this. But do you think it is more harmful than good that theaters are just doing this in February? Should they stop doing that altogether, or is it a yes and situation? Yes, produce in February, but also produce in March, April, June, July, and so on and so forth. What are your thoughts about that for these theaters who are thinking, hey, by doing this, we're checking off these boxes?
I think with the work, right? Like if you're going to produce a show in February, then really produce it and let it be relevant to Black history, and not just, hey, all right, we got some Black people, you know, let's see what happens because it's February. But like, okay, what does it mean to celebrate, to honor Black History Month? And if you're not celebrating and honoring it, and it's like, you're missing the point. You could do
right.
that. You could just do a Black thing, like you said, in April, in June. Matter of fact, do a Black thing in May and April. And, you know, if you're really connected to your community, you understand that there are other hallmark times for Black people besides Black History Month. You know, I have 2 Black organizations, and we're not doing anything for Black history because we do Black stuff all year long. And so Black History Month is like our break, because we're like, whoo, the rest of the community has it this month. We don't have to do anything. We can actually sit back, maybe attend some events, you know, hang out, maybe take the month off as a celebration of Black history and not do anything. You know, so it's, if you're truly invested, what does it mean to give something of relevance? And if you're making it for your white audience, then just be okay with that. Don't try to make it seem like, hey, look what we're doing for people of color or for Black people this month. Just be like, hey, white people, we're going to school y'all all month about Black shit. And then do it. Like that's a great, you know, contribution to Black History Month, is not having Black people have to do all the work.
So it's not even so much about, if I'm hearing you correctly, it's really about the fact that the work that they're doing, the boxes that theaters are checking in those particular moments are performative. It's like, hey, we're featuring some Black performers, we've done the thing, rather than making it incredibly relevant to what the month actually represents, to what the actual work should be, to the communities that they're in, to the message that they're trying to get across. It, again, to go back to your word from earlier, Sadiqua, it's lazy. It's really lazy. It's performative at the laziest possible level in that particular situation. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say, I just think, like anything else in life, anything that you do in life, just be intentional, you know, be intentional, and know your audience. Who are you talking to? Who is your community? What are you trying to do? Why you want to tell these stories? Why is it important? You know, like, you know, answer those questions, right? And if you can answer those questions, then good for them or you or whoever, right? Good on whoever's doing it. So I think that where people get in trouble is, you know, Black History Month comes around and then people go, we got to do something for Black History Month. that'll get you in trouble every time, right? Because Easter comes around, we gotta do something for Easter, like figure out like why what you're doing is important, get that down, and then figure out who you're talking to and why. And I think if people would start there, then maybe what we would see would not be so like basic and lazy.
Yeah, it's like the Christian or the Christmas Christians, right? They go to church just on Christmas and forget about all of their sins the rest of the year.
Yeah, you don't go to church on Christmas or New Year's. Why? Why are you doing that? Why?
Right, right, right. I mean, you should be praying the rest of the year. Frankly, it's just not that one day for sure.
Yeah. So yeah.
Going back to some shows and things like that, and the type of work that I'm hearing should be produced and done by these theaters. The Boston Globe ran a great article this past summer discussing the plays and musicals that have been written, which center around Black people and other marginalized groups' relationship to whiteness and oppressors, and their oppressors. And in it, the question is asked about how one can do deep dives and use the fact that theater holds a mirror to life and is a political act to make art. How can you use that to stay true to it, but also get to the root of the issue without focusing on white supremacy and oppression? And I pose that question to each of you. How do we make theater the political act it is and ring true without focusing on that?
You can't. You can't, because again, it's ingrained in the history of the country, right? So if you don't produce theater, that if you're going to do theater for in particular Black people, and you're going to talk about racism, you have to talk about white supremacy, because again, that's a big part of the problem. Are there more things involved that you can talk about? Of course, but that it seems, I mean, that's the foundation to me. Like you can't not talk about it. You would be doing yourself a disservice to a certain degree.
Yeah, can I piggyback on what DeSean just said?
Yeah, absolutely.
So yes, because here's the thing, right? So say you don't do something, like that's like super in your face and it's like directly just like yelling at white people, which I've seen a lot of shows that do that, right? Get on stage, in your face, we yelling at white people for 90 minutes. Boom, let's go. Let's hit it, right? Okay, so there's that. Okay, there's a lot of plays that are being written like that. Fine and good, whatever. People go pay tickets, go to see them. Okay. But then, if someone were writing a play, or if there was a play and there was a Black family, okay, and then a member of the family was like incarcerated, for example, or if the Black family is living, at a certain level, like, below the poverty line, for example. I can't see the rest of you all.
We're all here. You just are making some points. So you are right, front and center on stage.
Okay. But, no matter what happens, like in telling the story of like, people who happen to be Black, you have to consider the full context of what has happened in this country, especially if they're American or living in some other colonialized society. You have to like take in account like the history and like the broader context, right? Nothing is written in a vacuum. It's just not. So you can't really talk about like a family who has like somebody who has been incarcerated. I'm just using that example. And you talk about like the prison industrial complex and how it was basically founded on, slavery, and the enslavement of Black people. It all goes back to it. So it's kind of hard to, you can't really isolate these things or compartmentalize it, because when in storytelling and in theater, especially, you have to look at the whole picture. So, yeah.
You know what? I'm going to piggyback off of both of those and agree and in a way disagree, because I do think that I agree in as long as work is being made for white audiences, then you have to talk about white supremacy. Yeah, I do agree with that. But I think that when you move away from who is your audience and you start looking at more shows reflecting the audience, right? So a Black show in front of a Black audience, then I think you can kind of change the narrative a little bit. You can talk about more Black joy. You can have Black people just experiencing a day in the life of, and not talking about whiteness at all. You can have, even African stories coming forward. You can have, all the things that happen in Black people's lives that's not centered around whiteness, right? Because as long as there are white people around, right, we have to talk about these dynamics and why you can't and can do certain things, blah, 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 blah. But if that's not your main audience, if you're not showing them anything, and the conversation changes when the audience changes, which is again why it's important to, the theaters and things that are doing stuff already in the community. They get to have these other conversations that a lot of the major theaters don't get a chance to have because of their white presence and their white audience. Honestly, there's certain things that put in front of a white audience. You put it in front of Black audience, people are laughing, they're clapping their hands, they yelling, they're cheering, they're acting like it's at a football game, it's involved, it's exciting. And you put that same show in front of an all-white audience and they're like, I didn't understand what they were talking about. Oh, they were talking too fast. I couldn't quite hear the accent. They didn't do a good enough job for me to comprehend.
Interesting.
Because it wasn't for you to comprehend. And so that's why I say I agree and I disagree.
Right.
Can I actually speak to that too?
Please.
Okay. So years and years ago, I wrote a play based on my crazy ass family. Okay. And the dad character, right, based on my own father, had a major drug problem. Okay. And was going ham the entire play. Right. So I was the first time this play was produced, and I was a kid when I wrote it. I didn't know what I was doing, and I was at had it produced at a university, okay, a majority white university, and when the play went up, opening night, it was in front of a majority white audience. It was like all of the money, came and saw it, and it was like a bunch of old white people in the audience, and everybody was like. Everybody was so shocked, right? And like, oh my God, and and it was like so deep to everybody. But when I was writing it, it wasn't even that serious to me. It was just, my dad like acting crazy, whatever, right? Who cares? And I was just like, I couldn't wrap my mind around why everybody was so like shocked, why I was so like, oh my God. So when the run, went on a little bit, the people from the boroughs caught wind of it. So people from like Brooklyn, Queens, Jamaica, they came out to see it. Totally different audience, totally different reaction to the play, right? People like falling out, laughing, like that was what I thought in my head when I wrote it, right? I didn't write it for it to be like so deep. I wrote it like just to be just a story about this family, right? Doing whatever. So, but because of the issues that came up in the play, in front of a white audience, all of those things, drug use, poverty, blah, 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 they become like these white, like these topics of conversation, because it's like, oh, look at the white supremacy that's happening as like the undercurrent that is influencing the storytelling and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, yeah, because that's just what it is. That's in the soul of the fabric of everything that we create, right? Because that's just the life, that's where we live, right? The matrix in which we live in. But me just being a 21-year-old kid who wrote this play, and then when the Black people and the people from the boroughs came out to see it, and they were just like, ah ha ha ha, it wasn't all of that, right? It was just a shared experience that they knew too, and they understood. So it didn't have to be all of that. But depending on who the audience is, it will be whether we wanted to or not. So
I think that raises a really interesting question, though, in coming back to programming and things that theaters are going to do. And Alma, you had mentioned intentionality, and Sadiqua, you had mentioned, earlier about defaulting to what you called slave porn, essentially in that particular thing. As you're picking shows and things like that, what is the experience, and how should theater companies be picking these shows when the audience experience is going to be so different? Should they pick something? I think I'm coming to a realization as I'm talking here, so let me work through this moment. But if the theater is very clear about what their mission is and what they're trying to put out in the world, it should be an easy path to pick the right project that adheres to their mission, regardless of what their audience is going to think about it. They should almost kind of damn their audience in a sense and say, this is who we are as a group, and this is the show that is going to fit into that mission. Is that kind of in line with what you're saying? Because I think really the crux of this particular question is, and to your point, DeSean, is do we ever get away from white supremacy when picking a show to be able to shows the joy that happens in Black communities and things like that, those particular things. I'm thinking of the show Shout. I went and saw that at the Rep, I think it was this last year. And it was a wonderful story, but it felt like it was written for a white audience at that particular point. But yet there was still this joy and magic that was happening in the audience that I was just enamored to be a part of. I didn't feel like the show was written for me, but I was so grateful to be there. So my question really is, and this is a really wordy, long-winded whatever I'm doing, but it's my show. No, I'm just kidding. But my question really, though, is how do we pick the shows that are intrinsic to the theater companies, and maybe that's the movement. Should that be the norm moving forward, that we pick the shows that are inherent to who we are as theater companies, as opposed to really worrying what's going to land with our audiences? In your situation, Alma, you mentioned you had two completely different experiences because the money was there. And then when the people who the show, the people who understood and got the material came, it was a completely different show. And I'm sure your actors felt that completely too. From opening night going, oh my gosh, we were horrible, and this is all about these really deep, dark subjects, to then all of a sudden being something else. Let me clarify.
Don't get me wrong. Just because the money was there and they were shocked and like, oh my God, they didn't dislike it.
Okay.
It was old white men in the audience crying. So there's that.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
But it was a different, what I'm saying though is it was a different experience totally. Just as far as the reaction to it. On one level, it was like, on one side, it was like so deep and so heavy and so, oh my God, right? And on the other side, it was like light and like, yeah, they tripping. This is just what happens. It was just two totally different experiences.
Right.
Because two totally different lenses. It was being viewed through two totally different lenses. So, to answer what you're saying about like, should you just pick the shows that are intrinsic to who you are as an audience? I think now I'm having a realization. I'm thinking that, any show that you pick is going to be received differently depending on who you put it in front of.
Right.
So, yeah, so I guess it's about knowing your audience and knowing, who's actually going to come to this and who's going to see it, and what impact you want it to have based on that, maybe.
And accepting your audience, right? Like, like if you know that this is what your audience looks like, it has looked this way for 50 years, 10 years, 5 years, and you are not actively investing on changing your audience, not your stage, not your theater, not your staff, but your audience. If you're not actively really making that a priority, you might as well just do what you like, because that's what's going to be in the audience is, white people. So do what they like, and but just be more conscious about it. So like the Hansberry Project, they do these readings of, 10, 20 plays throughout the year and these are just Black women, not even including all the plays by Black men that are out there. But just in Seattle, she does a reading where you don't even have to read the play yourself. You can just sit down, have some popcorn and a glass of wine and listen to some plays and to get some ideas going, right? Because when as a behind the scenes person too, right? I've been in the room where, you know, these theaters are reading through script after script after script to decide just the perfect play. But when it comes to Black scripts, they just pull one off the shelf. It's time for August Wilson again. Pop, pop, pop. Let's dust it off and do it. You know, but it's like, no, if more theaters did the same amount of research to plan the rest of their season for their Black show too, even if they just keep it, yeah, we're going to do one Black show. We know we're going to do a Black show. Then do the research, read 20 Black shows before you decide on which one to do. You know, I think that would broaden people's scope. And I think a lot of theaters would see that there's some really dynamic work out there that's not being done. You know, as avant-garde, as classical as you want to find it, there's a Black playwright that has created something that will blow your mind in that field.
So let's imagine for a moment that the sky's the limit and money is no object in this particular scenario. And we have all of these amazing shows out there that are not seeing the light of day. How would you imagine the future of Seattle's theater scene with money, no limit, there are no objections in this particular way? Spitball. So how would you address some of the blind spots that we've talked about and getting some of this work seen that is not being seen? What would you do moving forward if you could just write a prescription for that? Or you have your wishes, you can, and unlimited wishes from this genie to make things happen. What would you do?
I would probably start with a Black theater festival. You know, black artists, Black works, and just something to showcase everything that we have as a people, both the good and the bad, right? So we want, and so that way it would give, I think it would give more people to come and see what the Black experience is in a much more broader sense. You know, just I don't know. I'm trying to get my words together while thinking this through.
I know I put you on the spot there, DeSean.
No, it's okay. It's totally okay. But yeah, but having a festival of Black works where it's just we all going to sit down and just enjoy the Black experience in its many facets. I think that's a great place to start. But Harry, you did say something interesting when you were giving us a very long worded question about, you know, doing things doing things, you know, basically bored be damned. And it's interesting that you said that, because I think that's the other problem is that, you know, you have to deal with the board, you have to deal with donors, and you can't necessarily cut out your donors because that's your livelihood. That's the reason why theaters can do the shows that they do. So I think that's another reason why predominantly white theater companies aren't necessarily willing to take an extreme risk, because you don't want to lose that money, because that's very, very important.
Absolutely. Well, and Sadiqua had hit on this point from earlier, which is if you're not doing anything to diversify those audiences and to build that audience and reach out and say, hey, this is who we are as a company, we want to include all these people, not just the folks who have been giving us the money, and spreading that around so that way people can see that, you're going to be stuck doing the same thing. You're going to have to answer, and, you know, really your choices are limited as a company at that point. Isn't it so much better to play with all of the paints as opposed to just one in this particular thing? I mean, you know, and if you can get out there and really diversify your audience and do the work. And I think that's really the thing that scares so many companies away is, oh, it's work. It's work to be able to do that. But it's necessary to be able to do that. And I apologize, I'm going on a tangent off of what you said, DeSean. No,
that's okay. That's why I wanted you to kind of expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that bringing back. But I love the idea of a festival. Other thoughts or comments or wishes that you would love to see?
Absolutely. Two things. One, there's actually several Black arts festivals that happen in Seattle. I think the thing is, the people who go see it are, you know, people who appreciate Black art and, you know, or just want to consume Blackness, right? But producers don't go to these events with in mind, hey, I'm looking to see what I might want to, who I might want to reach out to, what I might want to partner with, what, you know, artists I might want to invite to an audition, right? They're just going to consume. So I think that it could be helpful, but the people have to go with that in mind.
Do you see that then, Sadiqua, as these festivals that are happening is like, oh, that was nice, that's a one-off event, and people really aren't engaging to continue that work forward?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's like, oh, that was cute, good for them. They did that, and then they go back into the world. I think also, to speak to your question about wish list, if anything could happen, I would say if I could change everything tomorrow, I would say every major theater company in Seattle needs to partner with a smaller POC theater organization for at least one. Yeah. At least one production, right? So like so if the Seattle rep said, hey, Hansberry Project, we are going to do one of a production that's coming out of the Hansberry Project, we are going to produce it. You just need to do all the creative yumminess, but we're going to take care of the tech. We're going to take care of the space. We're going to take all of that stuff that you get when you work with a big organization, right? That a lot of the smaller theaters don't have. Or, hey, we want to do something with Brownsville Productions, and we're going to bring, we would normally spend $20,000 on this production. We're going to bring that into, the New Slate Theater and see what Brownsville would do with that, because that's our partner, like partnering with these different organizations so that you can see, like, if everybody has the same budget, the level of art really would be at the same caliber way more often. And that could be something that organizations could do if they just allowed themselves to, right? You're going to do a production anyway. You're going to do 6 productions or 4 productions or 3 productions. Why? If you really believe in the work of reparations, of, giving back, of equity, that means that you have to do more than just hire a brown person, right? You have to do more than just do a brown show. You have to give something up of yourself, because that's why it's not equitable, because something was taken, and until that something is given back, it's never going to be equitable. And you're always going to have all of these small organizations coming up and failing, because they're trying to compete for the same money, that these larger organizations get a chance to have, because they say they're going to work with these artists that are in these smaller organizations. Mm-hmm. So it's like you're getting the money because you're working with these people, but you're not giving these people any of the money except for when it can benefit you directly. That's not equity. That's not reparations. That's not anything that any of the boxes say that you are doing. So you have to do more. Like, you just have to, people have to step down or step off or, move to the left, whatever they need to do in order for this other piece to not only be able to be done, but to flourish and to be done well.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I've been taking furious notes as you've been as all of us been speaking here, because you're all saying so many amazing, wonderful things. Alma, anything that you would throw out from this wish list idea?
I like Sadiqua's answer.
All right, we'll give a high five to Sadiqua there. Mm-hmm. We are coming up on our hour. Actually, we have just hit our hour, and I do want to leave some time for questions. If anybody has a question for our panelists, please feel free to pop it into whichever form you're on, whether that is Facebook or YouTube, and we'll go ahead and pose that here. I'm going to move on with another question here, as we're just kind of talking and waiting for a question to show up from our audience. So this past year, we saw the Black Lives Matter movement take center stage, and it became a reckoning for a lot of theaters, professional and nonprofit, to determine the depth and realization of their own diversity and inclusion policies. And a lot of these theaters issued beautifully worded and crafted statements recognizing their diversity and inclusion, but as we all know, it wasn't enough. So what do you think needs to happen next? When the doors open, the pandemic's over, what needs to happen next from these theaters who have written and said, hey, yes, we're here?
More outreach, right? If you're going to stick true to your, or show that you are sticking true to that new mission statement, you need to be willing to whenever all of this COVID-19 stuff is over and done with, being able to reach out to not just Black folks but people of color as a whole, and say, hey, what what do you want to bring to the table? We have the space, we have the tech crews, we have everything that you need. We have the money. What is it that what is the dream piece that you want to put in our theater house? And be willing to be upfront and let them know, hey, we want you to come in and do this, and this is you. We're providing everything else that you need. Bring it. Whatever you want to bring into the kitchen, go for it. It's all yours. And I don't know if theaters are necessarily willing to give up that much.
Interesting.
I think for me, the question always goes back to community and who is your community, right? So one of the phrases that I kept seeing in the emails that I was getting about equity and BLM and all that stuff was, we want the trust of our community. The community, blah blah blah, insert community. It just kept coming up, right? That phrase, and I was just wondering as I would read these emails, well, who is your community, right? Like, who is your community? Who are your donors? Who are your audience members? And in my mind, most of the community, like that I was hearing about, older white people who are donating money to these theaters.
But we might be having a lag.
So
issue.
I'm just kind of like, well, okay, if that's who you're going to just send it out of black. Oh, am I still lagging?
Yeah, you're lagging just a little bit.
I'm lagging. Oh, no. What about now?
I think we're okay.
No? Okay, I don't know. I'm sorry.
No,
okay.
No worries. No worries. But
I mean, I don't know. Like,
your point, Emma.
Okay, so I was just basically saying, all right, well then who is the community? Who is this community that you speak of, right? So I think that, long story short, what the theaters need to figure out is, okay, if they want their community to be more Black people or people of color or whoever it is that they want to reach out to, they just need to figure out how they're going to go about engaging that community and that audience. And that's basically what it comes down to. And that includes audience members, donors, board members, all of it. Because if you don't have all of that together, then you're just going to end up having just one-off productions, one-off things that are really dent, and you're never going to build it that you imagine that you have or that you want to have.
Right.
Yeah.
I kind of got in my feelings about all those letters that came out, honestly. Probably because I'm like, on email list of like probably all the theaters
right.
In the city. So I saw a bunch of them. And the thing that every time I read one, the thing that came up for me would be, but when I told you about this thing when I was working with you, you had nothing to say about it, or you said, oh, that's nothing, or that's just them, or brushed it under the rug, or, oh, I'm so sorry, nothing. And so for now that all of this stuff is exploding, you to send out this letter, to me, I was like, I don't care that you're sending me out this letter, because I've already seen you in action. I've seen how you work. I've seen how you move in these spaces when conflict is brought up to you. I see how you ignore. I see how you turn red in the face and just giggle it off, or, oh goodness, that's terrible, and then nothing else. Like, I've seen that happen with so many different organizations and theater companies, so that when the letter came out, I was just like, like, that was cute. I'm sure you felt like you needed to do that. But if you felt like you needed to do that, it's probably because you haven't been doing that. Like, I didn't feel the need to send out an equity letter to any of my constituents. I didn't feel I needed to do that.
Yeah, pretty much. But it's because, why, Sadiqua? It's because that's all you do. That's all you do. Is work on that mission, that's pretty much that's what I do. That's all I do. So when it came up, I was like, well, that happened. Unfortunately, it's terrible. I'm tired. I'm sad. I'm angry. But then that was just all me on like a personal level having to deal with shit. But then everybody had to do like their PR shit, which I get. I understand. Like everybody do your PR. You know what I'm saying? You gotta do it. So put the letter out, put the statement out, say what you got to say. But I mean, at the end of the day, I'm kind of like I know what it is. It's PR.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, the fact that all the Black theater, not all, but like a large consortium of Black theater artists came together to talk about how messed up things have been in the theater scene, so much so that they were like, we need a task force, we need meetings, we need to come together, because as all those emails came out, a lot of the community was just like side-eyeing, like, you're saying what? No, we need to come together, because if all the theaters are now putting out these statements saying that we're doing this, then clearly all the artists need to come together and let them know how they're not doing it. So that was a positive thing that I saw come out of all those letters come up, is the artists got a chance to come together and was like, They think they're doing it. We need to address the fact that they think they're doing the thing.
So how do we move forward at this particular point and help those theaters at the ground level? Let me rephrase this question. Change is going to come from the bottom up, right? It's not going to come from the top down. So from the bottom up, what can we do right now? What can these organizations do right now to continue to help drive racial equality and drive out racism from the theaters?
Harry, it's funny you say it can't come from the top down, but I feel like that's the only way it can come from the top down, because from the bottom up, if you're talking, performers or whatever, throughout that's been happening. We've been there. It's from the top down that is the problem of what is the executive director and the board and the president of the board. Where are they? What are their thoughts? And right. Are they in alignment with where the organization says they want to go? And if not, then they got to go. No more old guards. If you're not down with the new program, then you got to go.
No, yeah, and if you're going to be about your statement, you're absolutely right, Sadiqua, with that. It does have to start from the top. What does your board look like, right? If you're trying to be about this, but your board and your major donors are white, then what are you really doing, right? And adding more Black people as donors, and maybe Black executive directors, Black artistic directors, and your board be more diverse as a collective, you'll be able to a lot of those changes will just naturally happen. We just have to get there, and there's a lot of hoops, because again, there's POC money out there. There is. It's also being able to bring them into something like theater, which is not something that a lot of Black folks have necessarily experienced. Like, we are performers naturally, right? But we don't necessarily always come into the stage necessarily. We do a lot of things, recording and TV, but not so much on stage, if that makes sense. Sorry.
I think I understand what you're saying there. But definitely it sounds as though it really needs to come from the top down, and we need to oust those folks who are not in line with what the theater's mission is, and really examine that and make sure that the change is happening across the board. It cannot be performative. It cannot be a mission statement released because something happened that has been happening continuously, and it just so happens that this is what caught the spark. This is something that has to continue to it has to be the work that is being done on a daily basis.
And Harry, especially during COVID, because the top is all who's left. Mm-hmm. Everybody else got fired.
Right.
So you can't even ask, the few people of color who used to work at the organization, they not working there no more. They got fired. And that's at a lot of organizations where the people who would normally be able to step in and say, hey, don't do yes, no, got fired. And so when all the companies are trying to look and see what to do next, or if they're doing it right, I think this is going back to another one of your questions, is what can they do is really talk to when you're about to do a Black show, start from the beginning. As soon as you think, I'm gonna do this Black show, think about, do you have the Black people to do the show? Do I have a Black director in mind? Do I have at least a few Black, cast members that I think would even come out to audition? Do we need to have a culture person come in so that the director is not asking the cast 1,000 questions because they don't understand the culture of the show they're trying to direct? Like, that's not what the actors are supposed to do. If a theater can't get, the Black artistic team that they need, then they need to hire the Black cultural people to come in and not just utilize all the knowledge from the cast, because that's a whole other job that you're not paying them for.
Right.
And they're barely getting paid in the first place, right?
Right.
DeSean, I know you can speak to that. Like, theater, it's not a joke, performing on these stages. So when you ask me, okay, not only do I need to learn on my lines, learn on my choreography, I also now need to teach you about my culture so that you don't mess it up.
Right.
It's like, no, that any other show, you do a Shakespeare show, you hire a Shakespeare person, or you do a show with accents, you hire an accent person, a voice coach or something. So when you do a Black show, you need to spend your money to bring in that person that's going to come and help give you advice, and not put that work on your actors or your stage manager or anybody else in the show, honestly. Could have had feelings about that.
No, I'm so glad that you do. We are going to take
I was with you on the train, Sadiqua. I was with you. Like, go.
We're going to take a question from our audience. Jasmine has a question here, which is about the Seattle Theater Leaders. And if you all have heard about the work that the Seattle Theater Leaders are doing, led by J. O'Leary Wood. And if so, what do you think about that particular work?
Well, I attend the Seattle Theater Leaders meetings from time to time, and I think Jay's doing a great job.
Can you, Alma, for those folks who are watching who may not know what that is, can you expand a little bit more as to what the project is?
Yeah, so she put together a pretty much like a think tank, if you will, of the Seattle theater leaders in the city. To pretty much work on like anti-racist work in the theaters. And they're just trying to, I guess, like, reimagine like what it could look like, pretty much like everything that we talked about in this conversation, trying to implement some of those things into the way theater is done just on a day-to-day basis, just trying to just change some of the internal processes.
That's great. Anybody else? Sadiqua, DeSean, have you heard of that project?
This is my first time hearing it, so I learned something today.
That was actually the group that I was referring to when I said a bunch of people had to come together. It was that group. It's Jay's group. She's been doing a phenomenal job. She's such an activist for the community and for the work. So it's with that kind of organization that a lot more theater arts are starting to be able to come together and realize that they're having shared experiences, because it can feel very isolating. Feel like, oh, I'm the only one who's having this experience, so I don't want to say anything. I want to get hired again. I don't want to be a squeaky wheel, da 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 da. But I think since this coalition has kind of come together and people realize that, oh no, it's not just me. Oh, you had this experience too. You did too. Oh no, they're starting to really be able to put voice to the experience and raise the expectation. So I think when theaters open back up, they're not going to have a choice as far as, how they behave, because the performers in the city are definitely taking control over how they're going to be treated.
And holding them accountable too, right? I know that there's probably going to be that next level of, if you don't do X, I'm not going to work with you anymore. And other people shouldn't work with you either. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We are just at time. I want to make sure that if anybody does have a question out there, that you put it into the chat window so we can get that out there for our guests, Alma and Siddiqua and DeSean. But as we are coming up on our conclusion here, DeSean, you had said something in pre-chat as we were kind of warming up and everything, and I'm just going to touch on this and put you a little bit on the spot here. But you had mentioned that you had never worked for an all-black theater company. Is that true?
That is very true. I've never worked for an all-black theater company ever. I don't think it could just be mainly to lack of knowledge. I mean, granted, again, grown up here in Seattle, going to school in Seattle, went to Garfield High School. Surprisingly, though, the Garfield being in the middle of the Central District, it was kind of a predominantly white school, and as was the theater program, as that tends to be in every high school in America. It seems to be there's usually only a handful of black thespians to do theater clubs at their local high school. So I was, and none of us knew, the inner black circle at all. And so doing this podcast with Alma and Sadiqua has been an eye-opening experience for me. And is there a website maybe that I can go and look and figure out where all these places are, so I can get in and do stuff with other black folks as well?
That's a great question, and it's actually going to help me circle back to my point, which we'll do in just a moment. But is there a resource out there? Does that exist that tells folks of all the black theater companies that are in Seattle and where they exist? Or is that something that should exist? Is that something that should be taken on to be able to say, hey, this is the art that's happening out here? It's not just these little pocket theaters that are existing out in the neither regions. Is there a resource like that?
Well, no, there's not like a spreadsheet anywhere or a website that I can think of. But what I know about it is like, okay, so I'm not from here. I'm from Washington, D.C., which is like probably, maybe not so much anymore because it's being gentrified. But when I was growing up in D.C., it was like probably one of the blackest places on the planet that you could like live, right? And when I came out here, what I wanted to do was find community, find my community in particular. And I kind of like put an effort into like seek out, people who are like doing black artists, doing black art, doing black things like that. Right. So I put kind of like that work in. And actually, Siddiqua didn't know me at the time. But years ago, I went and I saw one of Siddiqua's shows, I saw two of Siddiqua's Earth Pro Collective shows. And let me tell y'all, you go to a Siddiqua Earth Pro Collective show, it's going to crank. I guarantee you it is going to slap, right? Now, I went on two different occasions. I saw one, it was like a concert at like, what's the name of that girl? Danny Cassette?
Danny Cassette and
okay.
Monica B.
Okay, I saw a Danny Cassette concert at the Jewel Box. Was it? Years ago. Okay, there. When I tell y'all, there were about 50 people in that room, but is it she or they? I don't know. They turned that thing out. Like I was like, oh my God, right? Then there was like this whole other like poetry like showcase thing that was happening at it was out in Bellevue, and it was where the comedy club used to be. Gosh, I can't remember. But anyway, you know what I'm talking about. Fantastic. Fantastic. It was just great. It was like burlesque and like erotic poetry and like all this stuff. It was great, right? It was so great. And I just remember being like so impressed, right? And I didn't even know who Siddiqua was, right, at the time. I found out about this thing. I kind of saw it, and I went out and just went, right? And a lot of times I'll make it a point to see like, okay, what black plays are coming up around town, and I'll go see the play, and then I'll walk up on actors and be like, hey, you were so good in the show. I'm a producer in town. I might have some work for you one of these days, and, just when you see me, like, don't run away from me. And I'm not going to name any names. I'm not going to name any names right now, but I'm going to tell you this. I've walked up on people, black actors in this city, and I've like told them like, hi, I'm Alma Davenport. I have a production company, Brown Soul Productions. We produce new work by women of color, blah, 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 blah. And they will literally run their asses away from me. And I know that we are dealing with a lot of internalized racism that we have to deal with, and we're dealing with our own stuff that we're dealing with, but I would say Well, I just went on a tangent there. I would, but I would, but I would say, just search it out. If be intentional, intentionality. That's the word. That's my word for this evening. And if somebody approaches you in the street and tells you that they want to, that they like what you're doing, or they like the work, or whatever, just don't run away. Like, all right, well, hit me up, message me or something on Facebook. I don't know, right? So I'll leave it there with that.
Well, and you kind of give me a great segue, Alma, which the tangent begot this next point, which is, as we're ending our hour together, what would you like people to leave this conversation with? And it sounds like intention. You've mentioned that a couple of times. That intention possibly might be that thing, unless you'd like to expand upon that a little bit more.
Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. I think that's
intention. Yeah. Move with intention.
Intentionality. Yeah, I think so.
What about for you, DeSean?
Have an open mind about everything, right? And just if this is something that you really want to do as a theater company, go in with a completely open book and a blank slate.
That's great. And Sadiqua, what about for you?
Give money to smaller orgs. I think that's my soapbox for the year, man. Just give money, give funds, give resources to smaller orgs. Don't make them have to beg for it. They're doing the work. Just give it to them. That's how work gets paid for and has historically, except for when it comes to Black businesses and Black organizations. Everybody else, they get seen and they get uplifted. I just say to do the same thing for all these organizations and theater companies and theater artists. If you're looking for where the companies are, find your theater artists and ask them, where are the other theater artists and where are the other theater artists? Because everyone's out there working, but they tend to kind of go into hiding, when there's not a big production, or, when there's not money involved,
Absolutely.
So I think to put your money where your mouth is would be my biggest takeaway, in any way possible. If they're doing a show, go see it. If they're doing a fund, go pay for it. If they are uplifting an artist, you go uplift that artist, but look at the community that you want to reach out to and serve, and see what they're celebrating and what they're uplifting, and take that as your cue.
That's great. And is also a great segue into my final point, which I said that we would wrap around and bring back. Alma, I wonder if you could talk to folks a little bit about the slate and what that might look like, and in terms of reopening, getting you some business in there and things like that to help produce work and things like that. If you could just talk a little bit about your vision, your plan, and where people can find out information to be able to work with you.
Absolutely. So you can go to slatetheater.com or brownsoulproductions.org, and you can learn more about our work, the theater, the organization, all that. As we enter phase 2, what we are looking to do is outfit the space so that it is available for like streaming. We also want to open it up to where it's like an interdisciplinary art space, which means like outfitting the space with like Marley flooring and, getting it ready for people who might want to screen things there. Keeping it in use as like a black box theater for theatrical productions and musical productions as well. So, that's the ultimate vision for that. But, of course, I'm always going to say this. We need money to make all these things happen. I can't just, snap my fingers and then boom, we have a whole new floor or whatever. So, if it's in your heart, or if you're moved to donate for that space, it is a space in service to the Seattle theater and arts community at large. So go ahead, and it's good. It's there. Invest in it. It's the community. It's the space for, the community. So, did I answer everybody's question?
I think you did. So just, for folks out there, go to Brown Soul Productions or slatetheater.com to find out how you can get involved and help support Brown Soul Productions, Black-owned businesses and things like that, and to continue to put that money back into the pieces.
And also the Slate Theater, it's a space for the Seattle community. It's like, yes, I'm a Black woman. I run the theater. It's a Black woman run theater. yeah, if you want to support it for that, cool. If you don't care about the fact that I'm a Black woman and I'm running a Black-owned theater, and you just want a space for the Seattle community because you're an artist and you want somewhere to do your work, then do that. Do it for that too, because
the check still cashes, essentially.
That's right.
yeah, you know,
check cashes, right?
So yes, so it's there for you to use. Come on, if you want it.
And I think both Sadiqua and Alma, both of your websites are set up for donations. Is that correct? If we were to point folks to those,
yes.
Sadiqua, that's true.
Yes.
Great, perfect. We are at our time, and this has been a wonderful conversation. There are so many other things that I would love to dive into and talk about, and we could probably be here for hours upon hours and days upon days. I really want to thank you, Alma and Sadiqua and DeSean, for your time, your thoughts, your energy, your emotional labor for this evening. I really, really appreciate it, and for taking the time to spend that with us here at Reboot Represents. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
It was an honor.
Thank you. To learn more about our guests and the work that they do, you can visit brownsoulproductions.org. Kevin can pop that up there for you, and you can take a look. Again, they are set up to take donations. Again, that's also slatetheater.com. You can check that out. To learn more about the work that Siddiqua is doing, you can visit earthpearlcollective.com, and that should pop up there too. And both sites are set up to take donations if you would like to make a donation to any of our guests for this evening. Thank you again, and we will see you very, very soon. For all of you, for next month, join us next month as we continue our celebration of Black history. We are joined by a fantastic group of Black women theater artists who are going to be talking as well as in honor of Black history, but also in honor of Women's Month, which is in March. And we will be airing our show on March 8th at 7:30 p.m. You'll be able to check that out on Facebook or YouTube, wherever you're watching it for tonight. Again, many thanks to our guests, to Alma Davenport, Sadiqua Iman, DeSean Halley. Congratulations, DeSean, on your baby due in May. And thank you, all of you, for joining us tonight. Thank you, of course, to Kevin Tanner, the producer, and the Reboot board. And always thank you to everybody who took the time to watch us this evening. We couldn't do this without you, and I really, really appreciate it. For Reboot Represents, I am your host, Harry Turpin, reminding you to trust yourself, to be yourself, and we will see you next time. Thanks so much.